Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really tricky legal knot, and it all boils down to one critical question. Can justice actually have an expiration date? We're going to explore what happens when a powerful law, one designed to take down criminal empires, crashes head-on with the idea of a ticking clock. So let's just start with a question. And it sounds simple, but the answer is anything but. What happens when you're the victim of a crime, but you don't even find out about it for years, maybe even a decade after it happened? Is there a point where it's just too late to do anything about it? Okay, picture this. You pour your heart and soul into a business, but over a few years, it just crumbles. You figure it's bad luck, tough market. But then, a decade later, the truth comes out. It was no accident. It was a secret, coordinated conspiracy by a competitor to intentionally sink you. You want to go after them, but you're told, sorry, the clock's run out. And right there, that's where you get this huge legal mess, with two fundamental principles at war with each other. To really get our heads around this conflict, we first have to look at the main weapon in the legal arsenal for fighting these exact kinds of crimes, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or as you've probably heard it called, RICO. All right, so what is this thing? The RICO Act came on the scene back in 1970, and it had one big flashing target on its back: organized crime. The whole point was to go after the entire criminal enterprise, not just the individual crimes, by targeting these long-term, complex, and usually very hidden operations.
Now, here's what makes RICO such a game changer. Its scope. It's not about nailing someone for just one thing. Instead, it lets prosecutors take all these different crimes, bribery, fraud, extortion, you name it, and weave them all together into what's called a pattern of racketeering. It lets them charge one massive conspiracy. It's how you take down the entire web, not just one little spider. That's the power of it.
But, and this is a big but, every single legal action, no matter how serious, runs up against a hurdle. It's this ticking clock on justice. And believe it or not, it exists for a very important reason. And these laws are all about fairness. The idea is to prevent people from having to defend against really old, stale claims where evidence is gone and memories have totally faded. It's a core principle. At some point, the books have to be closed so everyone can move on. Okay, so here's where things get really interesting, and that knot gets tight. On one side, you have RICO, a law built specifically for secret, sneaky, long-running schemes. And on the other, you have statutes of limitations, which are all about acting fast. These two ideas are on a direct collision course. And this creates what is, well, a total paradox. I mean, think about it. The whole point of a RICO conspiracy is that it's hidden. So how in the world are you supposed to sue someone within a deadline if you have no idea you've even been wronged? If you're not careful, criminals could actually win just by being good at keeping secrets. And this slide right here just lays out the whole conflict the courts had to solve. Which rule do you use for RICO cases? Do you go with the accrual rule, where the clock starts ticking the second the crime happens, even if it's a secret? Or do you use the discovery rule, where the clock doesn't start until the victim actually finds out they've been hurt? You can see the tension, right? One rule protects defendants, the other protects victims of these hidden crimes. So this wasn't just some dusty law school debate. Nope. This was a real fight. And it climbed all the way up the ladder of the legal system, right to the very top, the U.S. Supreme Court. They were the ones who had to untie this knot for good. The case that finally settled it all was Agency Holding Corp. v. Malley-Duff and Associates. And the question before them was simple, but the answer was huge. When does that 4-year countdown for a civil RICO lawsuit actually begin? Their decision was going to be a really big deal. It would either hand a powerful tool to victims of fraud, or it would basically give crooks a playbook on how to get away with it. Okay, look at this timeline because it really shows you what a massive difference this makes. Let's say the conspiracy starts in year 1. Under that old rule, the accrual rule, the 4-year time limit is up by year 5. Game over. And the victim? They're still completely in the dark. But the Supreme Court went the other way. They picked the discovery rule. So now the clock doesn't even start ticking until year 7, when the victim finally uncovers the whole mess. That gives them a real shot at justice. And this quote from the majority opinion really gets to the heart of their thinking. The court basically said, look, the whole point of these crimes is that they're secret. We can't let that secrecy become a get-out-of-jail-free card. It would have completely gutted the entire purpose of the RICO law if criminals could win just by laying low for a few years. So what's the big takeaway here? Why does this one ruling matter so much in the real world? Well, this isn't just some abstract legal doctrine. It totally changed the game for how these kinds of cases are fought. The legacy of this decision is just a fundamental shift in the balance of power. It gave victims of complex fraud a real path to justice and put criminals on notice. Just hiding your scheme won't protect you forever. And the ruling created one clear, consistent standard for the entire country, striking a really crucial balance between the power of RICO and the principles of fairness. And that kind of brings us full circle, leaving us with one last thing to think about. The discovery rule solved a huge problem, for sure, but it also shines a spotlight on this constant tug-of-war in our legal system. How do you balance giving victims their day in court with protecting people from claims that are decades old? That search for the perfect balance between justice for the past and certainty for the future, well, that's a challenge that never truly ends.